fish smaller than your hand opens a mouth wider than its own body. Not wider than its head. Wider than its entire body length. Off the coast of California, at 6 meters down, a creature the size of a pocket knife holds territory like a warlord. Rocky reef. Cold Pacific water. The ambient sound of surge moving through broken shell beds. That is where Neoclinus blanchardi lives and where it waits. Charles Gerard first described this species in 1858. He gave it a formal name. He did not fully reckon with what its face could do. The common name came later. Sarcastic fringehead. The sarcasm, according to ichthyologist Milton Love at UC Santa Barbara, has nothing to do with personality. The word derives from a Greek root meaning flesh-tearing. The fringed brow ridges sit heavy over dark, still eyes. At rest, the fish looks permanently furious. Then something enters its territory. The jaw opens. Not like a door swings open. Something else happens. The corners of the mouth stretch past any point that should be anatomically possible. The gape exceeds the fish's own body depth, documented explicitly by Love in his 2011 reference work on Pacific coast fishes. Two males will press those open mouths directly against each other. Jaw to jaw. A contest measured entirely in gape size. Stevens et al. Recorded this behavior in the journal California Fish and Game in 1970. Males engaging in what they described as mouth-to-mouth combat, widely opened jaws pressed together, bodies twisting in cold water. The fish with the larger gape typically wins. No biting required. But here is what the footage alone cannot tell you. The mechanism producing that gape is not what any standard fish anatomy would predict. Researchers studying the blenioid family Neoclinus found something inside that jaw structure that rewrites what a vertebrate mouth is supposed to do. The biology of how that jaw actually works, and why no other vertebrate on Earth does it the same way, will be on the table by the end of this video. The answer is not what the textbooks say about fish mouths. Here is the obvious explanation. And it almost works. Wide mouths are everywhere in the ocean. Groupers, stargazers, anglerfish. These are ambush predators built around a single mechanical principle. Open fast, open wide, create suction. Pull prey in before it can react. The gape is the weapon. Evolution perfected it across dozens of lineages, independently because it works. So the fringehead must be a variation on the same theme. A blenioid with unusually flexible jaw ligaments. A reef ambusher with an extreme version of a common tool. Case closed. Except the fringehead does not ambush anything. Milton Love at the University of California, Santa Barbara documented fringehead feeding behavior in 2011. The prey, small invertebrates, amphipods, tiny crustaceans, organisms that require almost no gape to capture. A modest mouth opening, a centimeter or two, handles the entire job. Love noted the fringehead's diet places zero mechanical demand on a jaw capable of opening wider than the fish's own body. The feeding footage confirms it. A fringehead takes a small amphipod from the substrate. The mouth opens to a normal, unremarkable width. Nothing about that moment suggests what the same jaw can do. Watcherapong Hongjam Rasilp at UCLA documented this mismatch formally in 2022. Gape size relative to body dimensions. Extreme. Prey size relative to that gape. Negligible. The math does not balance. A predator's jaw scales to its prey. This one doesn't. Stevens and colleagues noted as far back as 1970 that fringehead males press their open jaws directly against each other. Not to bite, not to feed. To measure. The fish with the larger gape typically wins the contest without any actual contact. The gape is not a feeding tool. It is something else entirely. But the feeding explanation also cannot account for this. The jaw does not simply open wide. The geometry of how it moves is wrong for any hinge-based model. So if standard jaw mechanics cannot explain the range of motion, what is actually happening inside that skull? Here is where the explanation breaks. Not the behaviors, the bone. Researchers studying Neoclinus blanchardi found something the behavioral record had buried. Not its aggression, not its territory, but its actual skeleton. The jaw does not open wide the way a grouper's jaw opens wide. It does not hinge down, gap and stop. The premaxilla and dentary bones rotate outward past vertical, past the point where any standard jaw model predicts tissue failure. And then they keep going. This is not stretching. This is inversion. The oral cavity does not part. It turns outward. Tissue that normally faces inward, pale and soft and never meant to meet open water, ends up facing the camera, facing the rival, facing whatever is outside. Philip Hastings at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, working on blenioid taxonomy through 2014, documented the skeletal architecture of this family in enough detail to confirm no comparable rotation geometry exists in any other studied vertebrate jaw structure. Not in the deep-sea family. Not in the wide-gaped ambush predators. Nowhere. Rita Mehta's 2010 work on blenioid jaw mechanics identified the feeding architecture of related species. The mechanics were unusual, but the fringehead pushed past even that frame. So the obvious question arrives, cold and specific. If those bones rotate that far, past 90 degrees, past 120, why does the joint hold? Jaw dislocation in vertebrates has measurable thresholds. Ligament tension, muscle load, rotation arc. These are modelable quantities. Every other animal that approaches this rotation range either dislocates or has structural reinforcement science can point to and name. The fringehead has a ligament arrangement that allows full eversion and full return. Under 1 second, repeatedly, across a lifetime of territorial contests. And that arrangement has not been fully modeled in any published biomechanical study. The bone survives. The tissue retracts. The face reassembles. Nobody has explained how. Here is the payoff. The jaw does not open. That is the wrong word entirely. What happens inside the skull of Neoclinus blanchardi is eversion. The facial architecture physically rotates outward, the upper and lower jaw bones swinging so far from center that the mouth cavity turns inside out. Tissue that lives internal becomes external. The fish is not opening. It is inverting itself. No other vertebrate jaw studied to date does this. Not the grouper, not the anglerfish, not anything with a spine and a skeleton. Morphological studies of the Neoclinus family confirmed the mechanism and confirmed its singularity. But here is the part that reframes everything you watched in the earlier footage. The aversion is not aggression. It is measurement. When two male fringeheads press those everted mouths together, tissue to tissue, bone width against bone width, they are conducting a physical comparison that cannot be falsified. The skeletal width is exposed. Fully. Whatever the true gape size is, it is on display. There is no bluffing. The smaller fish cannot perform a larger jaw. The skeleton tells the truth. Watcherapong Hongjam Rasil at UCLA documented this in 2022. Contest outcomes tracked against gape size. The column labeled winner, the column labeled larger gape. Check marks matching down the page. The smaller fish retreats. No chase. No wound. The contest ends the moment the measurement is taken. This is what biologists call an honest signal, a display that physically cannot be faked, because the thing being displayed is the thing itself. The skull. Exposed. Real. Remember the opening, a fish smaller than your hand, a mouth wider than its own body, and the promise that the mechanism would be stranger than the footage. The mechanism is a vertebrate that resolved territorial conflict by evolving a skull that tells the truth. One fish, one jaw, no equivalent on Earth. The Deep Index has this filed. The entry closes here.